workshop of the semester using formative and summative assessment for online teaching versus in-person teaching. So the assessment council have been organizing this since the beginning of the fall semester. So our distinguished speakers will be Shaila Karaju from Biological Sciences, Jordi Getman from History, Elis Gratadoria from Health, Physical Education and Recreation, Monique Ishar from Social Sciences, David Puglia from English, and Theresa Smalek from Communication Arts and Sciences. So they will have an enlightening discussion. They will share their personal experiences and insights into the implementation of diverse teaching and learning strategies they use in their synchronous and asynchronous classes. So I think I will follow the same order from the flyer, and I'm gonna call Shaila to the floor. Shaila, are you ready to share?
Yes.
First, perfect. So remember, you have about 10 to 12 minutes, and I will remind you if you exceed it.
Sorry. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone. Thank you so much, Ray and Seher, for putting this together. I really enjoy learning from all of you, and it's a great journey. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about curating your course for mastery learning. So, what is curation, right? Curating a course content is an active process. And when you curate when we curate our courses, we can sort of expect student success, like 80% student success, which has been my experience when you curate. But if it's not curated, then anything can happen, right? It depends on the class, it depends on how good they are and what kind of background they have. So that's sort of leaving it up to chance. When you follow the chapter outline out of a textbook, or if we are using the PowerPoint presentations from the publisher, and we've all done that when we first started, because we don't feel confident, about how much should I cover, and what's important, what's not important. It takes a while for us to understand what's important. I learned from my previous chair, Marty Fine. We would have long discussions about what are the fundamental principles in biology. Not everybody agrees. So then we would have long conversations. Thanks to those conversations and thanks to Marty Fine, I actually thought about curating my content, and I would discuss it with him. And so this is how I break it down. The way I break it down is, when you think about knowledge is broken down into factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, and procedural knowledge. Procedural knowledge is application. So when we curate our content, the way I look at it is like this little tree that I drew. Factual knowledge, or the very basics of any concept, any lesson plan that we take, the factual knowledge is the root. You can't do conceptual and procedural if you don't have factual knowledge. So I think it's, and then the details. Unfortunately, when we don't curate our content, what happens is that students are at the risk of leaving our classes by only knowing some vague details and not really anchoring those details in any strong foundation. So as a community college, we teach basic classes. We teach, and basics are, I don't say basics are simple. Basics are very difficult. They must be relearned every day, right? Every time you have to relearn them. We ourselves relearned our basics many times. We took one class and then we go back, you learn it again, you lose it, and then you learn it again. And that's how learning works. But it's important for us to think of every lesson plan as factual, conceptual, procedural, and then details. And in that order of importance, factual is important. Immediately beyond that is the conceptual. And then how do you apply it? And then sometimes you can come at it from procedural to conceptual and then go back and check the facts. So when we curate our courses, we're also better able to handle the study skills and to scaffold our formative assessments. I, for example, give a lot of retrieval practice, and now we learn that retrieval practice in the form of quizzes and self-quizzing is actually more effective than actually a student even reading a chapter. So actually they learn something, but then if you keep rereading, you're not going to get as much information than requizzing. So you study and then you requiz many times, right? That's what we all learn now in the cognitive neuroscience. And especially we should thank our colleagues in languages who actually have done a lot of the work on this, where we find out that retrieval is extremely important. The other is I make a big deal out of note taking by hand, which I think is a lost is kind of a lost art for many students. I bring it back to the classroom, and I, even though I absolutely love technology, and I'm always excited about new apps and new ways of learning. I feel that there are some classic things that we cannot lose sight of. And one of those is sketching, drawing, and oral explanations, and transcription fluency. The fact that you actually have to learn how to write quickly, facilitated diffusion, secondary active transport. Does the pen move to actually write these words quickly? And that's something I would like the students to learn. So the obvious benefits of curation is that you can breathe because you feel like your curriculum or that day's lesson plan is well balanced and is thoughtfully scaffolded, and it's and learning is happening, and it's enjoyable regardless of student makeup. It doesn't matter even if the students are struggling. We all have students with all kinds of different kinds of background, and you can actually navigate these different backgrounds if you have a very well balanced lesson plan. So unexpected benefits is that I realized that when I started using the flipped classroom, and that's when I started curating the content at the same time, is that it changes the class culture. The students become so positive, they become friendly, much more friendly. There's the decibel level in the class increases. Everyone is sharing, learning, confident. And that's what I want my students to have. We all want our students to have when they leave, is this confidence. I have to quickly share something. One of my students, very insightful student, asked me, "Professor, we're learning all these, you're teaching us all these basics, and you're making us apply to clinical principles and all these things. Now, what's the difference between between us and students who go to Ivy League schools?" So I basically was telling her that when it comes to speaking biology, talking biology, and confidence, the Ivy League students, they have this confidence, they have the panache, they know how to talk. But you guys have been trained in the fundamentals so well that I'm willing to bet that as far as fundamentals go, you guys are on the same plane. You know your fundamentals, because if you don't know your fundamentals, you cannot go anywhere further. So I think, but I said that I'm asking you guys to speak biology in the classroom, speak biology through oral exams and everything else. This is in a face-to-face class, this conversation happened, but I want you, because that confidence is important. We want our BC. I realized this over time, that confidence is so important for our students, for any of us, in order to move forward. And so we want them to exhibit the same level of confidence. So when we think the design process, when you are curating your class, is that first thing is you want to have, want to step back from your class. Let's say you're teaching respiratory system. You literally have to step back and say, okay, the textbook has all this. What is important? What do they need to know? What are the learning outcomes for me? Of course, there are learning outcomes for the course. We will follow that. The course learning outcomes say students will demonstrate understanding of fundamental principles and apply them. That's it. So the question is, what are the fundamental principles? Certainly not everything that's in the chapter. There can only be a few fundamental principles. What is the process? So we need to step back and literally write out our own notes from start to finish and say, this is what I expect them to know. If I can't write out my notes or storyboard, my class, my lesson plan, and otherwise, if I don't do that, then I lose control of my message, right? And so that's what is important with curating. When you curate, you decide what's important. And the pedagogical philosophy, the two pedagogical philosophies that I use, one is the growth mindset, and the other is the threshold concept theory. That threshold concept theory basically says that struggle is inevitable, but students will be transformed by it. And we need to understand that. And I think it's a very deep concept. I won't go into it now. And the growth mindset that the more formative assessments we have, the better it is. So I'm going to just skip over and talk about the main elements of designing the curriculum. One is congruence and alignment. So when we curate our own material and lesson plan, like I said, we have control over this alignment. So it start with the factual information must build into the conceptual. The conceptual must build into the procedural or application. And similarly, the pre-learning module must build into the quiz, the online quiz, the pre-quiz. Then when they walk into class, if it's if they're walking into class, it's the same whether it's, for me, my class is pretty much the same, whether it's face-to-face or online. The only difference is that the way they do it, and it's the same thing. So they have a series of formative assessments, and these formative assessments build on each other, and they are perfectly aligned. And then so that the final, like we had this conversation yesterday at our department meeting, Carlos brought this up, is that how do you align, don't we already align our formative assessments to help them with the final exam? So we had this discussion yesterday, and it's so great that we're all on the same page about alignment. I never thought about alignment when I first started teaching at BCC. I just taught something and I gave an exam, and that was it. And then and then I think 1/3 of them failed. So it was normal. But now it's like, no, we need to align this. The teaching, the learning opportunity, the evaluation, the assessment, they all must build on each other. They must all perfectly align. Otherwise, we're actually making it it's very frustrating for the student if they don't align. So what some of the things, and the second thing that I learned when I was doing the flipped classroom, I did a lot of reading on cognitive load. And so cognitive load is when a student walks into the classroom, we can only, in terms of working memory, we can only hold about 7 units of information in your head. And you have to manipulate those. You have to know those. You have to understand those. It's very hard to do that, especially in a class, in any of our classes, which are content heavy. So that's why we scaffold. So I make the students, for example, to address this cognitive load, I make the student, that's why the flipped classroom works, because they come prepared to class. So the cognitive load, what we call the intrinsic cognitive load, is decreased. There's also extrinsic cognitive load. Extrinsic cognitive load is using, for example, an image directly from the publisher with too much detail on it. That would be extrinsic cognitive load. Why all this detail? They're getting lost in all this detail. We need to, again, break it down. Again, curation helps. So what I normally do for the class is to address this. First, I made a bunch of videos. So I think we all made videos, during the pandemic. So I made a bunch of videos, and they're on YouTube. The students take notes first. Then they take a quiz. They gamify the basics. So I gamify the basics. They do a quiz. If it's a face-to-face class, when they walk into class, we have a warm-up session. We go over the material, and then we do a formative in-class quiz. That's in class, but online, I will show you in a minute, it's about the same. It's done slightly differently. And then we do sketch notes and oral explanations nowadays because of the level of engagement before they come to class. The students are so excited to actually pretty much teach my class. About 1 hour of my 3 hours as the students teach it. They come up and they explain, they write out things and they write flow charts, they do everything. And it's not like as if I just say who's done it, who wants to explain it, and they explain it. But sometimes I go through the entire class and say everybody gets a chance to explain it. That's going back to that oral explanations that students brought up, which was what is the difference between us and the Ivy League students? So the Ivy League students have panache. They know how to talk. Sometimes they may not always be correct, but they know how to talk. So we're going to teach you the basics so you know how to talk and it's correct. So that's where I'm at as far as this. And I think my student, she's my current student. She really, I think this inspires me about that vulnerability that our students have. It's like, am I as good as the Ivy League students? It's like, why not? We have a small class. We can do this, we can work this. So the next last thing they do is a Google lecture worksheet. So this is addressing cognitive load, where we scaffold this. If you don't curate, you cannot scaffold. You can scaffold all you want, but it won't work if you don't curate. You have to curate. So another thing that works, that's very important, it's a small, yes, sorry, do I have more time?
A couple more minutes.
Okay, yeah. So the next thing
time, but a couple more minutes.
Communication. The next thing is communication, and that's extremely important. I use mobile messaging app Remind. You don't have to use it, but that's what I use, and it comes from also the paper that Goldie Share and I wrote, and this is based on nudging students. We cannot, Sahar and I and Goldie cannot stress the importance of nudging. Sahar is very good at it, by the way. But she's very good at nudging. So nudging is very important to get students to do the work on time. So this is a very important element. The last thing is context. The context is so important because we always have to have context. I know Elise had asked me last time to show me the sketch notes. So Elise, this is what it looks like, the sketch notes. I put it for you. So it's like to show you, for example, everything we do has to do with like, how does diabetes lead to high blood pressure? So if you ask any of my students today, they will explain it to you. By the end of the semester, they can do this very well. And I was surprised how much they can do this. And here's another example, Elise, this is really for you. To show you what this happens. And then I actually make students draw stuff like this on exams. I literally give them my notes and I tell them, I want you to redo this, because I believe in modeling good writing, good practicing. And at this point where we teach basics, I feel that modeling is everything. So here are some advantages of this flipped classroom. I think I already talked to you earlier. The student confidence increases and everything else. Quick note, this is the formative assessment in the face-to-face class. Let me show you this in the asynchronous class. One is note-taking. They watch my video, they take notes. Second is I give them a quiz with concept check. Here's a UJA sign. Thank you, Carlos. Next time I'll be using UJA. I used to use Play Pause It before, but now I'm going to do UJA. Thank you. Gamify the basics. This is also came from Carlos, Rafi, everyone in the department. Help me. It's like, hey, what's good? What's good? You're like, oh, try Quizlet. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try Quizlet. So I tried Quizlet. Then the sketch notes, they do sketch notes where they, copy my notes and stuff like that. That I use GoodNotes, came from a student who was using it on their iPad, and I was like, hey, what's that? And so I learned from my student. And then I used Google Worksheets. Love Google Worksheets because they really help to make entire quizzes and everything else. The last thing in my online class is that the students come in once a week for a weekly check-in, for a one-on-one check-in. And we actually spend 15 minutes where the student actually explains to me the concept of the week, the oral again, the oral, which we talked at length. So quick last note is that if you're planning to curate, we have to have a plan, not just for the class itself. You have to have an assessment plan. First of all, you have to have a lesson plan. You have to have an assessment plan. You have to have a delivery plan. How are you going to put it on, how is it going to look in your on Blackboard. And the fourth is how many videos you're going to make. And the fourth, last but not least, is your communication plan. You have to have a communication plan. How often, what's the quality, how you're going to communicate with your students, and everything. So what's the minimum you care? Defocus. Oh, I defocus on grading. I focus on the learning. That's it. The more I focus on assessment and learning and less on grading, the better my students do. So far, since 2012 to now, every single semester, I have 80% of the students getting 80% and above pass rate. So it really works. Curation works. I'm done. Oh, sorry. One more thing. And this is these are the cognitive neuroscience that I use. Myelination is for slow learning, and focus to get students to focus. You use handwriting, and habit forming is a huge part of this, getting students to do something weekly. I am done. Sorry.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Your talk on the curating your course for mastery learning, I think it gave us a lot of great ideas. And for the questions, we're going to keep our questions to the end because we have 5 more speakers. We do not want to take too much time because I want to make sure everybody is able to speak and talk about what they do in their classes. So please note your questions, note down your questions if you have any for the speakers, because we'll have a Q&A session in the end. Thank you, Shaila. So again, our list in the flyer is in the alphabetical order, and my next one is Joe is not here, Jordy. So Jordy will talk about how he's using formative and summative assessment for online and teaching and in-person teaching in his classes. Jordy, floor is yours.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's well. In the interest of time, I'm gonna make mine short. And I know that you hear me say those words and you don't believe me, but I am really going to try to, okay? Let me see if I can share my screen. This actually started as back in September, I made a presentation about AI, and this is a continuation of that. Can you see the screen? Okay, it's giving me hope that I can get through this pretty quickly. So basically, what I started talking about in September was the notion of AI and how it's starting to impact. And since September, things have already changed even more. So we're further down the track with what AI can do and how it can affect our lives, and you know, our in the case of what we're doing here today, our educational world. So this is all let's see. Okay, did that go to the next screen? Cool. All right. So AI, ChatGPT, more or less up till now, the conversation has been about ChatGPT when we talk about AI and how it affects our classes. I think it was yesterday, the day before, Google released Gemini. Haven't even played with it around, yet, but we will see where that is going to take us. How is it affecting how our students engage with us in class? We've been mainly concerned about whether they're using AI to cheat or not. I'm having those conversations in department meetings. We just did TLTR earlier today, same conversation there. It's an ongoing conversation. But to me, I wanted to zero in on the notion of information literacy and how AI might be influencing how we our students and by extension even us are informed on what the world around us is like and how it's evolving. And so what really caught my attention is when I started Googling about the Bronx, and this is not even really AI, although Google does use AI on the back end. And the top stories that were coming up were really about poverty, about destruction, about you can see these images. These are taken from the first few hits that I got off of Google on the Bronx. The bottom right one is one of those of you that might remember, I don't know if you were around yet, but the Bronx burning back in the 70s and 80s. That's the image on the left. So there's references to that. If you go to that part of the Bronx, the South Bronx right now today, you'll see that it's like huge new buildings. It's really a radical change. Also stories about fires in the present day. and the bottom right image is one of tours that are organized of the South Bronx, so that you can see the I wouldn't call it the squalor, but like what the South Bronx was notorious for a number of years, especially outside of the city. So it really saddened me to think that our students are living in the world that Google is presenting this way. Whether people at Google are thinking about this or not is another question. But anyway, so that led me to thinking about students. How can they, in my history class, engage in and analyzing how AI is affecting the way that we do work in the class, and how they can engage in research. And so I started mentioning, I was running out of time last time, so it's actually kind of good. So what I'm going to get into right now is just the assignment that I designed, which integrates a comparison between human generated content, historical content, and AI generated historical content. And so first of all, the question is, can we identify AI versus human generated? But going beyond that, how useful can AI generated content actually be? Can it be used in a positive fashion in our classes, in this case, history? So the important, I think, thing to keep in mind when you look at history, and Shaila used the word context a moment ago, I always push hard on the notion that, or I push forward on the notion that for historians, we talk about events, we talk about people. Napoleon has come out now as a movie, but this is like old history. The old history is famous people, important events, and important dates. And certainly that's what I was taught in school when I was young, a long time ago. I think history has evolved as a discipline to really engage in understanding the context of the time, of the events, not just from the point of view of the important person that you see here in this picture. I don't know if anybody recognizes this actor, but I'll leave that one dangling. But in any case, it's the context of the world that they lived in. How did the people around them live? How did people like you and me live back in that time in history? So in doing so, I wanted to see, is AI useful to understand how that context can be, how our students can better understand that context? And so let me keep moving here. What I did was set up an assignment that has students do background research on a topic that they've chosen. So a topic that has to come out of the class that we're throughout the semester. We've been looking at primary sources from different periods of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. And then so they pick a topic, they have to find human generated sources that address a question about that topic. So the important thing here is for them to come up with a prompt. Okay, so those of you who have played around with ChatGPT start understanding what prompting is all about. Well, Shaila was just talking about prompting in class too. How do we prompt assignments? How do we ask students to answer a question? Prompts are very important. They're important for us as educators, but ChatGPT, as it turns out, it is very important to prompt correctly to get the right answers from it. So I wanted them to really engage in prompting before they even got to AI generated content. As they are looking at human generated content, what prompt are they using to put into Google? I wanted them not to go to academic sources, but to find as close to an academic answer to the prompt or the question they're asking about that topic on Google. Okay, and it has to be human generated. So and there are definitely sources there, maybe not as exact or purely academic as we would maybe want them to engage, but that's what they're dealing with on a regular basis. And like I said earlier, I'm looking at how Google is interpreting the Bronx. So I think it's important to in the case of information literacy, reaching out, having our students be able to reach out to those sources and evaluate and analyze them correctly. So then they use the same prompt and put it into ChatGPT once they've understood how that platform works. They then they copy and paste the prompt and the answers that they're getting from these sources. So 3 human generated sources and then 1 engagement with ChatGPT. They throw it together and then they engage in an analysis of the AI generated content, based also on what they've learned from the human generated content. How accurate is it? How accurate is AI in actually identifying or addressing the different elements that would come into that answer? What type of biases are emerging through the AI? So, we think about AI as being a robot, as being technology, but we have seen in many recent studies that AI is heavily influenced by a number of different biases, including racism, right? Interpretations. How is the IA different in its final interpretation of that topic and that question that has been prompted? How is it actually bringing forth information that might be relevant, useful, or is it completely askew? Is it off base? Lastly, I wanted to have them look at the ethical implications. So start engaging in, after all of that thought process with analyzing the responses, have them engage in a reflection on how using AI has ethical implications in their work for the class, in the discipline, in their overall long-term learning goals as a student, and then after that as professionals. And then they conclude on that. By the way, I have a link in here. I've uploaded just to show you here. Are you seeing the website now? This is my e-portfolio where I have these are the actual instructions for students. And it all comes off of, these are some of the primary sources that they look at when making, hold on, when deciding on their topics, they have to look at primary sources that they have previously commented on with other students in the class. They go through and as groups work together on commenting on these primary sources. So their topics are actually narrowed down by this. I hope that helps to understand a little better. Okay, are we back here? Can you?
But we did not see your screen, Jody.
We're
seeing Rosie the Riveter, Jody.
Yeah, you have
that's
to
what you saw?
stop
Okay.
sharing this screen.
Here, let me see the share.
You have to stop sharing this and reshare.
Yeah, stop share. Hold on, I'll do it just really quickly because I think it's interesting to see that that students are actually, here we go. And there. All right, so these are topic 8, Cold War. I have the comparison between Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech and then, of course, Stalin's reaction to that speech. And what you see here is, this is an e-portfolio, student reactions and conversations that they're having. By the way, I tested to see how easy it would be to use AI to do this work. It's nearly impossible. It's very hard. So that is actually a positive right there. But from these topics, and there are 12 different topics that they cover throughout the semester, they come up with their own topic for their research. Now, let me just quickly finish with my presentation, and because I want to get to the conclusions. All right. Is that Rosie there? Okay. So let me skip ahead. So what are the student reactions evaluations? So that's what I'm starting to report on. They have not done the final analysis completely yet, but they're about 3/4 of the way through. What were the student reactions? The first reaction was, wait, we're using AI in class? So the first few weeks of the semester were really interesting at the level that I was getting either public conversations in the discussion boards, or I was getting emails that were more direct communications with me, asking me why, what does this mean? I thought we weren't able to use AI. Why is it that we're using it, especially for the major research project of the course? After the first couple of weeks went by, everybody started to get more comfortable with it. But the interesting next obstacle came with the prompting. The students were getting stumped on how to prompt. Not even the AI, but Google. How do they actually search for something, which is a really interesting engagement there. So that was something that I hadn't really, I thought something might come up like this, but it was really great to be able to engage students at the level of basic research skills in a way that we're using Google, but still you have to be able to, you can find a lot of information on Google if you know how to prompt. And then of course, as a result, I also came up with my own realization that my prompts in the assignment were not necessarily that clear. So about a third way through the semester, I had to add further instruction. So that was an interesting revelation for myself. Then the fourth element that I just wanted to point out is that students had to engage in this notion of information literacy in a way that most of them admitted to me they'd never done before. They didn't even cover your ears, Ray, but they basically said they didn't understand what information literacy was and what it was that was really going to be beneficial to them. So having had those conversations, then also as it became a teaching or a learning moment for all of us. To be able to further engage in that conversation really helped the students to understand, oh, wait, this is actually impactful, not just in the course, but in my life. And so that's leading to a great sense of, I'm already feeling, and like I said, we're not done with the assignment yet, but there's great student empowerment that is coming out of this. They're seeing themselves as evaluators of information in a way that they hadn't seen before the start of the semester. They hadn't thought, to Charlotte's point earlier about him, comparing themselves to students at an Ivy League school. I think that I'm really starting to see with students this sense of, oh, wait, I can actually have control over the information that I am receiving every day. And some students made the interesting point that they now look at Instagram differently. They look at Facebook differently. So that's been really interesting. And then the last thing I'll say on this, and I end here, is that because I brought ChatGPT into the class, I don't know if it's because the first time that they've encountered this or what, but I can tell that the AI use in the rest of the course has diminished almost completely. Like the attempts to use AI, because it's already in the course. And so it's also made me think about how to, in a sense, AI proof some of my other assignments, but beyond thinking about AI proofing, which is what most of the conversation on campus that I've been part of has been about, I'm now seeing how do AI integrate so that it can actually have a beneficial sort of outcome in the course. All right, so I'll stop there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I think this was a great presentation, and it clearly aligns with our information literacy efforts for next semester. So I think we should all give similar or use similar examples or assignments so it minimizes the cheating as well using AI, right? All right, thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions for Jordi, please jot them down because we're gonna do the Q&A at the end. So in our list of presenters, Elise is next. So we're gonna hear from her how she's using formative and summative assessments in her online classes versus in-person classes. Elise, floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to share. Hold on a second. And then I'm going to, I do this for every single one of my online classes. I have to share, then put it in screen mode and then change screens. It's like, whatever. Okay. So let me start by saying that I don't have a PhD. I have a master's degree in education, and I'm certified by the state of New York to teach public school, which I did for a long time. It was exhausting. It was 10 years. And then I came to BCC and I didn't have to break up fights anymore. So it was wonderful. But this has given me a perspective on teaching. There was one point in my career where I was in one single day teaching 6th grade, 11th grade, and college juniors and seniors and graduate students. That gives you a perspective on what learners look like. And I brought all that to BCC, and I'm not teaching little kids anymore, but I do dream back about what that was like. So the courses I'm teaching now are very content driven and to a certain extent, extremely controversial. I teach aspects of human sexuality, which is a science course, or it's from a science perspective. All of the health courses are interdisciplinary by nature. I teach critical issues in health. The problem with it's my favorite course to teach, but it's only 2 credits, which means I have to teach a lot of sections of it, which means I'm dealing with an enormous number of students. And my public health course is a 3-credit course. And again, in all my courses, I focus on science, medicine, and the law. I could take this from a lot of different perspectives and get into a lot of trouble, but I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, so I don't have a lot of flashy pictures. Trust me, when I do PowerPoints for my students, there's lots of graphics, lots of links, lots of everything. But I thought for us, just change it up and just put out there where I'm coming from and how I use what I have learned in the last 25 years of learning how to teach. Very early in my career, I was told that if you're not assessing, you're not teaching, you're just talking about it. That stuck. But it's also important to remember that the things that we're not assessing, that we're just addressing, are still really important, because that tells students what's coming next and where they can go with the things that you're focusing on and assessing and comparing to their learning outcomes. People have been mentioning in the presentations, a lot of our time seems to be focused on preventing students from cheating. I refuse to make that my job. My job is about learning. Obviously, if the cheating is blatant, I'm going to do something about it, but that's not my main job. Another philosophy that I have is almost every assessment can be an opportunity for learning. We designate certain assessments as summative because we're out of time. This is the end of the course. This is what the students have done so far, but you can learn from every single assessment or test or whatever. And I kind of, even when I'm putting together an exam or a final exam, I allow students to, because in an in-person class, you give a test booklet and students can flip back and forth through the test booklet and maybe figure out the answer to a later question on the exam from something that they figured out from the beginning of the exam. And I don't want to take that away from my online students. So even though it's more prone to cheating, I let them see the entire exam and flip back and forth just like they would do in an in-person test, because the learning is still happening. And I think that's what our focus is. I'm a huge advocate of student-centered learning. I already know everything I'm teaching, obviously. Now it's the students' turn, so they do the work. I do other things. As a health educator, most of what we teach is not easy to measure. If I'm teaching a lesson on preventing child abuse, I can't measure how effective that was because some of my students haven't even had kids yet. I don't know if they're mistreating their students. So we have surrogate markers for figuring out if we've done that well, but it's not easy to measure. Most of the best assessments we have are authentic. So they're not necessarily quizzes and tests. They're different. We had Janet tell you, we had a wonderful, wonderful assessment of preventing heart disease and promoting heart health. It was so onerous to accumulate the data from that assessment that we had to stop doing it because we just have too many students. But that was a really good, authentic assessment. Now we do other things because it's more efficient. And one of the things that I learned is that you can't use the same strategies with novice learners that you would use with advanced learners. Advanced learners come into the classroom, as Shyla said, with more confidence, but they also come in with a lot more background knowledge compared to novice learners. And so you have to accommodate that. So when I was taught to plan out lessons, I was taught that we have to say, okay, in the classroom, what are you going to be doing and what are the students going to be doing? And in younger classrooms, if you expect your students to just sit there and listen, you're not going to have a very peaceful classroom. So what do teachers do? We facilitate the learning. That's that whole guide on the side or sage on the stage. It's not that pure decision. It's a little bit of both. We facilitate the learning. The students do the work. We create assessments for the learning outcomes. Students have to do, listening, the watching, do the problem solving a little bit, but they have to make connections to what they already know and connect it to what they're going to be doing next. And that's where curating the learning materials comes from, what Shiloh was talking about. I think I spend the vast amount of my planning time finding the best resources, the best videos, the best articles, everything that will help students make those connections, and providing feedback. Of course, we time box everything, so everything gets done by the end of the semester. But providing feedback is probably my most important function on a week-to-week basis. And that's part of humanizing my courses, especially my asynchronous courses, where I don't get to see the students. It drives me crazy when I'm walking across campus and some students say, "Hi, Professor G, how are you?" And I'm like, oh my God, that must be one of my asynchronous students. I don't know what they look like, but I say hi anyway. I find that it's most productive for my students to use iterative practice. So the only thing they can't do over again are the exams. Everything else can be revised, resubmitted, and I'll regrade it and give them a better grade. And of course, the students have to do those assessments to prove that they've mastered whatever the learning outcomes are for that course. The way I was taught to look at assessments, they could either be things that students produce and can hand in, students' performances that they can do and be observed both by the teacher, and also they can give feedback when they observe another student giving a speech or doing a role play. Giving constructive criticism, I hate that term, but giving feedback to the person sharing the information is another way of learning. The one I struggle with the most in an online environment is teacher observation. And this one is really discounted by the people who really want to hold faculty accountable. Like, we want to make sure that you're earning your pay, and so you have to prove to us by a certain percentage of your students passing the ELA exam. That's the English language arts exam they take in 4th grade. But I still think it's important. If I observe students working in groups and they're working hard and they're processing and they're using the language of the profession, and although that counts as an assessment, because I am an expert in my field and I can judge just by watching students use what they have been taught, but that doesn't always count in official circles. So, and this one is the hardest one to do in an asynchronous environment where I'm not watching the students do their work because it's asynchronous. Okay, some other thoughts that I have, and I wish that for some reason I can't see your faces and it's driving me just a little bit crazy, but okay. Are
you in full screen?
I have 2 screens.
Okay.
So, but one of them went dark, which is fine.
Right.
As you can see my screens, I'm happy. I am partial to qualitative evaluations as opposed to putting everything into numbers. So discussion boards mean more to me than quizzes. I have learned that if I'm not getting the answers that I'm looking for, it's because I'm asking the wrong question, or I'm not asking it well. As Jordy talked about, learning how to prompt AI. Sometimes we're not that good at prompting our students, and so I have to revise that. Also not a fan of high stakes testing, in case you didn't notice. However, I remember I was teaching my human sexuality course at SUNY Brockport, and I had juniors, seniors, and grad students, and a lot of the grad students were earning their MSWs. And I gave them a bubble test, because we used to do that with a pencil and bubbles. And they were freaking out because they had not taken a test in years. They had been writing a lot of papers, but not taking a test. And I asked them, I said, what's your certification test going to be like? Is that also an essay test? And they said, oh, no, that's a bubble test. And I'm like, oh, so this will be good practice for you, because it's really not fair for all of our students who are going on to take certification tests, licensure, if they're going to take the MCATs or the admission, bar exam, bar exam is an essay test, but the LSAT is an entrance exam and it's a bubble test. So it's important for us to give those tests so that our students have practice in taking that, because so much is writing on those things, but I don't really like them. Because a lot of times the students who do best on the tests are just really good at taking tests. It's not really a reflection of what they know. So a lot of what we do as teachers is to just let students know what is already known, what's out there, so that they know how to find that information when they need it. And it'll probably be years after they leave us. I do focus a lot on vocabulary. In my public health course, it's learning the vocabulary of the profession. When I was teaching middle school, vocabulary was what separated my students who were growing up in generational poverty and had very few resources coming into the classroom compared to my daughters and their friends growing up in the suburbs. The number of words they knew was so separated that I've been driven to make sure my students grow their vocabulary. And some of that is memorization, although most of the time I don't ask them to define words, I ask them to describe the word, because the more words you have, the more ideas you can build. I already mentioned about the iterative process, because you don't learn anything by getting the right answer by accident, but if you make a mistake and you have to fix it, that's when you learn something. I do grade everything. I know Charlotte said she doesn't like to focus on grades, and I totally understand that, because the only place grades wind up is on your transcript. But in reality, you have to have a good transcript if you are going to proceed to senior college and grad school and professional schools. So there has to be a balance. And I also know that if students are not getting a grade, it's like they're being asked to do something for free, because grades are what they accumulate. However, I'm very resistant to just giving away good grades to retain students in the class or in the program or at the college, because I'm thinking about the students who got diplomas at BCC 10 years ago, and I want them to be proud of that diploma. I want them not to have to explain that, yeah, it was a much better school back then, and now they're just giving anybody a degree. And I don't ever want anybody to have to justify that. Okay, I know I'm babbling on here, but
Elise, you have about 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Perfect. Okay, I do formative assessments. Again, students can take those quizzes online as many times as they need to get a perfect score. Blackboard knows to just take the highest score. I do give summative exams. They are very, very long. Very often, a lot of the questions don't count. I just want to know what even the best students know. And I won't penalize people for not knowing things that they're not required to know, but I want to know if they know it. So they're very long. It also makes it more difficult to cheat, which is a secondary concern, but there you go. Again, I don't believe that if somebody gets a headache during a test, that should be the end of their A in the class. So I let students pick their own time for taking an exam. I time box it. They either have 2 hours or 3 hours to take the test. The final exam, because I give either 3 or 4 exams, depending on the course, I drop the lowest exam score. So basically, if they have A's on the first 3 tests, they don't have to take the final. It's a good incentive. The most important formative assessment in my course is the discussion boards. These are shared with the entire class. So I do give some assignments, because a lot of what I teach is not something that the students want to share with the entire class. So I am the only audience for the assignments. And I do one project in my human sexuality class, which I adore because it's an authentic assessment. They take what they have learned and they interview friends and family about the topics they've learned in class and compare it to what they know. And it terrifies them, but they always come back with it, and they always say, and I've been doing it for at least 22 years, they always come back and say, this was really interesting, because they found out that their parents are not what they thought their parents were. So what's next? Using all of the new tools that are going to be available on Brightspace. A lot of the questions that I'm asking on my quizzes and other exams, like hotspots and scrambled questions and things like that, are not going to be available on Brightspace. So I'm going to have to rewrite those questions. But Brightspace has a whole bigger capacity for audio and video submissions, both by students and by me. So I have to work on that. And yeah, that whole AI thing that Jordy was talking about. Okay, I have just a couple of examples. This is a sample prompt for a discussion board. Again, this is an authentic thing, because most people really haven't thought about how they're going to react when somebody tells them that they had an STI. And I encourage students to be respectful and kind to each other, and I have to monitor that very closely. This one, this is another one that is a lot of fun. I just ask them to ask me any question they want. I usually do this in critical issues in health. They can ask me anything about human sexuality, and I'll answer their questions. But as I report to them the following week, because I always send an announcement every week, reflecting on the past week's work and telling them what they have to do next. The whole point of doing this is just teaching them how to ask a question. And letting them know that it's okay to ask a question. The answer to the question is just the reward, but it's a lot of fun. That's it.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. I enjoy seeing the specific examples, the prompts that you use. That's awesome. Again, if you have any questions, we're going to keep them till the end. And the next speaker we have in the list is Monique. So Monique will discuss how what kind of assessment approaches she's using in her online classes versus in person.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Could you do me a favor, and at any point, if you can't hear me, just unmute yourself or tell me in the chat that I'm coming out unclear. No, I haven't joined the military. This is my sister's jacket. I just need to feel close to my sister today. So I'm wearing it. Apologies. So this is the part of the presentation where I say the attitudes and opinions expressed in my portion of this assessment council presentation are my own, and not necessarily that of the Assessment Council or Bronx Community Colleges. Apologies in not doing something that I do and get on other people for not doing, and that is inserting descriptive text for the images that I would use. I just run out of time. If anybody wants a copy of my presentation, I will put that in really quickly. All right, bet. I'm going to use Google Slides because it's free 99 and I love it, and I just need to see the video panel. Okay, so I'm going to talk about culturally relevant and responsive approaches to online assessment. I'm really going to talk about teaching high flex courses, but also online synchronous and asynchronous courses, and what I'm beginning to articulate as like ways of enacting intimate practice, because there's like a notion that you're teaching online, things have to be distanced. I'm going to time myself. So if you hear Beyonce singing, it just means that my timer went off. Okay. So a lot of folks know me as obviously a professor at BCC. And I think I am a graduate of BCC. I've been teaching here since 2004. But at the same time, I'm a community organizer. I'm a psychologist that does lots of health equity research. It is in my adventures with health equity, really a grant that I got a couple of years ago that was about teaching Bronx residents, patients, and caregivers the language of research and ethics in order to unsettle the culture of research ethics in our borough that is very top down and needs to be bottom up. That had me rethinking a lot of how I teach. undoing jargon, but also a lot about how I assess and whether the frameworks I was using postulated by learning scholars and other folks from particular positions were appropriate for BIPOC elders, but also the multiracial students that we have at BCC. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So cool. So I saw featured Dr. Antibon. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question? It's not an issue right now, but I can't see all the way on the right side of your slides. Right now, it's just over a picture of the pencil.
Is that better?
There's the black. Is anyone else getting the black boxes like up at the top and then at the bottom? I can see most of the slide, the majority of the slide.
I don't.
Okay, now.
I'm gonna have control. Is that better?
So when you click on the slide,
that's...
so there's a black box appearing. Now it disappeared.
Good.
Yeah, now it's gone.
Thank you so much.
No worries. I appreciate that, Eva. So future Dr. Antibon Ntakudzi, could you join me in reading this slide, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Guichard. Unlearning colonial ways of teaching and learning. Traditional assessments tend to reinforce a linear, hierarchical, objective-oriented Western worldview, rewarding memorization of facts that align with colonial, white supremacist histories, while misrepresenting, overlooking or erasing the histories, genres, and rhetorical approaches associated with Black people, Indigenous peoples, and people of color, also referred to as BIPOC.
Thank you so much. I highly recommend, there's a consortium of, they call themselves eCampus Ontario, that's like 7 colleges that's developed a culturally relevant and responsive OER textbook for student-centered online and hybrid learning. I'll put it in the chat when I'm done. So I've been thinking a lot about like, kind of like Shyla and kind of like Elise and Jordy, about the things that I thought were important when I was developing assessments and the things that I thought were important when I was thinking about theoretical frameworks to use and not use. And one that I've fallen out of love with, and I'm not the only one, is Bloom's taxonomy, right? It turns out that there's not a lot of empirical support for Bloom's taxonomy, even though it is somewhat, for me, force-fed to a lot of early or beginning professors. It turns out that learning is not hierarchical in the way that it's represented. And it turns out that it overemphasizes the cognitive and metacognitive approaches to learning and really de-emphasizes like social learning, right? Or aspects of relational learning, which as a social psychologist are really important to me. In my adventures being a health equity scholar, psychologist, and community organizer, I've been reading a lot of scholarship on the most minoritized, most marginalized, and disabled students, and about the conditions by which they thrive, right? And for me, that means rejecting anything that resembles a colonial pedagogical frame, right? I take attendance in my class because I have to during the first week. We kind of do a check-in. I don't develop rules for my class. We co-develop community agreements. And if you see me do that at lots of presentations, probably surprising, I don't care a lot about due dates, right? My students know that they automatically have a grace period when they turn in assignments. They don't have to turn in what sometimes is becoming, forgive the term, but trauma porn, where they have to give me examples of them being evicted or doctor's notes. I believe them when they tell me that there's a reason that they have to be absent. And so I think a lot about what pedagogical practices am I enacting that mirror surveillance and definitely mirror the logics of carceral institutions. Okay, cool. I'm going to give a baby definition of culturally relevant and responsive teaching, a la Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, who says that these are really pedagogies of opposition, right? That are about, that are committed to collective and not just individual empowerment, that obviously care about academic success, but are about nurturing cultural competence, critical and social political consciousness, by which we help students challenge the status quo and even the social order. Again, from the same collectives textbook, I would like us all, and I'm wrestling with this as well, to think about, are we designing low stakes assignments? I don't know if those are necessarily are formative assessments, but are we designing low stakes assignments to support learning in an online environment? Do the assessments in all of our courses allow students to develop real world skills? That is what I care about the most, right? I care a lot about my students practicing qualitative methodologies. I care about them practicing writing like a psychologist. I care about them reflecting and questioning me and the text. And when we design assignments, how much are we centering students' identities, interests, goals, and learning preferences? I'm going to go through quickly a few examples of how I've done that. All right, bet. There's a culture to my classes, and I've learned a lot about this. Like, shout out to Jordy, shout out to Elise, shout out to Laura and others for being so generous when I was a beginning teacher. There's a culture to my class, even when I'm teaching online, synchronously and asynchronously. Every module starts with a check-in. How are you, boo-boo? Right? And we create a space of mutual vulnerability. Sometimes that's in the chat or a conversation. Sometimes that's on Jamboard, but that is being, it's going away. So I started using Padlet, but a lot of us are like, what do you need? Not just how are you, but what might you need from the collective, and definitely from me. A lot of times I'm open, and I'm not going to play these videos. I'm open and honest about what is going on in the world, especially as someone who's teaching social psychology, and how we can bring that into the classroom and begin to analyze that. So we all know that there are multiple genocides happening on the planet. I was teaching a chapter on social political change. We all concentrated and created a Padlet on hope. I'm skipping this video, even though I want to hear the words of Miriam Kaba on hope. This is an example. And by the way, all of the examples that I'm sharing are with permission from students. So I created a Padlet about what we do when we feel hopeless and when we feel despair. And it was a good way for students also to practice computational learning, because some just reflected and others added in GIFs and videos and different things. You're just seeing the stagnant version of that. In my online classes, I don't try to lecture all the things. I just go over big ideas. Students know that that is a part of the culture of our class. This is a module on the self-concept. I promise I'm almost done. What I was trying to teach students is to critique Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model and put themselves in the model. A lot of us are familiar with this. So they had to do a self-concept essay where they had to do some readings, but they also had to take selfies for 2 weeks and analyze their multiple selves. I don't have permission to show those examples. Rather than put student learning outcomes, I put hopes. I'm really upfront about putting hope. I hope that you do this. You might not do this. That's okay. I think I got 1.5 minutes left. This is more about the homework. I also give deeper dives for students who want to learn more or read more, and include both readings and viewings. And I also, like Shyla, do the homework. There's no assignment that I give to my students that I don't model or do. So I ask them to reflect on their self-concept and take selfies for 2 weeks. I ask them to answer who they are multiple times. I do the same thing too. Really quickly, I just want to go over, I use Google Slides a lot. Yes, I know that we have access to Microsoft 365, but it takes me 2.5 classes to explain it, and Google Slides is much more intuitive. So we were doing a chapter on oppression and empowerment, and as part of that assessment, we all created really small like social media posts about a change maker that other people might not have heard of. So I gave them some criteria and I gave them a template. I left them alone for 20 minutes, and this is what students produced. They developed a narrative about the person. They reflected on how that intersects with a notion that they learned. They embedded a video. Obviously, I don't have time to show the video. I promise you here, I'm almost done. That's another one really quickly. Well, the last thing that I want to show that probably Janet and Elise will think is really cool is that I want to expose my students to research methods that BIPOC scholars use. And so one of those is photo voice, using images rather than interviews or focus groups to tell stories. So I taught them this method. We went over the ethics of the method. I gave them a framework for taking images of the research question that we had was, what do campus images and community spaces that center diversity, equity, inclusion, and access and belonging look like at BCC and in our hood from the perspective of these community college students? And I'll just show you one or two, and then I'll stop. So this is Tara Robinson's community collage. She's naming the locations, and then she's including a narrative where she explains this, like the importance of those locations. And then students get together and then they analyze the stories across, and obviously they're curating collective knowledge. This is her analysis of BCC, and then there's some other students that have done that too. Yeah, so I'm really curious to talk about non-traditional methods of assessment. I have lots of slides that I shouldn't have. Thanks for hearing me out.
Monique, thank you so much. I think this is adding a different dimension to the assessment efforts that we traditionally know. And I'm really, really happy to hear about all these different things that you use, like how am I, who are you, like self-check-ins and photo voice activity for telling stories. I think these are new for many of us. These are all new assessment procedures that we could explore and implement in our classes. I really like them. And I'd like to hear more about these maybe in another opportunity. Thank you so much. So because of the time constraints, so we have to move on. Our next speaker is David. So David.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so mine is legitimately short, but I know since the value in these things often comes mostly from the discussion question, let's see if I can make it even shorter. So I'll just hit you with my thesis here to begin with. So I'm especially interested in asynchronous teaching. And the main point of what I was going to present today is that you need to assess your students, but you need to be open to your students assessing you. That's my primary thing that I'm coming here today. So I have been an asynchronous instructor for a long time. This summer, for the first time, I taught teachers asynchronous teaching, but I think my most important experience is that I was an asynchronous student at CUNY, at John Jay. And I think that is I've learned something from all of those experiences, but that was the one where I learned the most because it was the first time I got to be in the student's seat in the asynchronous setting. When I was in college, it was all in person. And so if I could get one thing across for assessment, you assess the students, you have to let them assess you. And not just you have to let them assess you, you have to put your ego in check and take that into account and make changes in your class based on the student's assessment. I think the assessment we do as far as instructional effectiveness at BCC is not adequate because, well, one, no, the students don't take it. But even if they did, if every single student took that evaluation, it would still need to be presented to us within a week or two of the course ending for it to have any value, because we would then need to incorporate those changes immediately. When we receive that into the next semester, it loses its value because I don't care at that point because I can't use it because I've already set the course for the next time. So what I do instead, and this is what I will show, this will be my show and tell for today, is to make sure that while I'm assessing the students every week, they're assessing me, or maybe I shouldn't even say me, although they can certainly assess me if I'm being inappropriate or not effective in some way, but also the course itself, what's working and what's not working. So what I do, something as simple as, are you seeing my Blackboard slide here? Yes, okay. Is this, so I think this is just one of the units in an asynchronous course that I teach folklore. So we have the start here, which is what they'll be doing for the week. The monster lesson, which is the lesson on the legend, genre, and folklore. Then I'm assessing them with the knowledge check, with the things, the knowledge transmission that I would like them to know for that week. We have the writing assignment, which assesses a similar thing, but from a different perspective, which helps with multiple learning strategies. But then we have the exit survey, and in a way, that's them assessing me and assessing the course. I admit it's more valuable at the beginning when I first begin teaching a class, because if I respond enough to this feedback, eventually the feedback stops coming because there doesn't seem to be any major concerns that they need to hit me with. In a way, when Monique was saying, and I know she does these check-ins, in a way, it's kind of like the check-in, except it's anonymous, so they would have to put their name on there. It would really be better for them to check in with me in other ways. But if there's something they want to check in with me about assessing the effectiveness of the course, they can do so without worrying that it's going to affect my judgment of them. So I like to do just simple true or false so that students will actually do it. I like to give a grade for it so that it's not free, asking them to do something for free. Instead, it's something that's so easy yet raises their grade. But then at the end, that has open. This is where I really make my money here. If you mark anything as false, what is it that I can do to improve this learning experience for you? And I think of all the improvements I've made in classes, it always comes down, this is the number one, because it turns out no matter how much I dislike what a student might say, they're usually right almost every time. Like, yes, that could be improved. So I'll leave it at that. But in asynchronous teaching, you assess the students, make sure they're assessing you in a immediate fashion and that you're responding to that assessment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was very short, but it was very effective. I really like using the exit survey, and this is a great idea. So based on the results, have you ever made big changes?
Constantly. Yes, all the time.
All right, thank you. And our last presenter is Teresa. Then we'll have the Q&A session. Teresa, are you here? She's here. Hold on. I don't see her. She was here. I think
she's logged in at least.
Yes.
Yeah, she's logged in. I remember seeing her, but she's not here. So.
Oh, she's here.
Excuse me?
There she is.
Okay, I just saw you.
I sent, sorry, my internet connection is unstable today. And in the interest of time, I mean, I really have no great, I have a very brief presentation, but I think in the interest of time, I'd rather have a question period about the presentations that have been made thus far.
Okay, it's up to you. We could go all for the Q&A session now, and thanks for Teresa. So we have 5 presenters so far, and the floor is open to the questions. Anyone? Please unmute yourself if you have a question.
Hi everyone. It was great. I learned a lot, and I just texted to Monique just answered it. I said, what's Ziplet? That's a new one to me. I needed to know what that is. So good. I will look at it. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other question?
Carlos, it looks like you're talking, but I don't hear anything.
There's Shelly, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Shelly, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you all for the great presentations. Yeah, I just have one question for Sheila. Yeah, you talk about curating course, but what do you mean by curating course?
It's when, let's say you're teaching a course that many sections are teaching, for example. So we have some learning outcomes that we need to follow, right?
Yeah.
So we follow the learning outcomes, however, you still have to make the course yours. So sometimes what happens is that when we come in to teach, you get the course and you sort of get the syllabus, and then you get the textbook and you get the instructor's materials and you're sent off to teach the course, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is not enough. When you start teaching the course, you still have to take every topic and you have to break it down into factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, and procedural knowledge, and then decide how you're going to present this information and how the student is going to, how it's going to be scaffolded. You cannot scaffold it unless you have curated it. So sometimes when you curate it, you don't go and say, well, everything in the textbook is important, right? Then you would have to choose what's important, and then talking to your colleagues. And it's a long-term process. You know, you start, but you keep continuing. And this way, and one of the things about curation is that you know exactly what's going to happen in every 20 minutes of the class. So my class is time blocked. So when I walk in, I know like the first half an hour, this is going to happen. Second half an hour is this. Third half an hour is this. So we break down the class, and then every formative assessment that you do is attached to a grade, so that the student knows that, okay, I'm supposed to be in class to do these active learning things.
Okay.
So you can curate everything carefully if you give a lot of thought into lesson planning.
Okay, thank you so much.
So Shad, it's like filtering the content to provide the background information, a strong background information, and its relevance to the following classes, like making the connection between the two, right?
So one aspect of curating a course is to be selective, right?
Yes.
The professor select, you know, what are the important things for that course. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Because it's impossible to teach every single detail.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
background information is where you start.
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you. Teresa? You have a question?
Oh,
Okay,
did you call me?
Your hand is up, so I thought you have a question.
Oh, sorry. Let me just lower my hand here if I can figure out. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to echo that I do. I really like Monique's and Elise's comments about, you know, allowing students to see the test. Like in my courses, both synchronous and asynchronous, I give them, I used to give them limited attempts and take the highest grade. And it's not, I don't view that as cheating. I view that as their effort to learn material. If they need the book, they can use the book. My goal is retention. And I've really become focused on retention. What can I do to keep these people in my class and engaged and excited? And so you know, Monique, a lot of your strategies I found very useful. And I mean, I don't have the sort of the visual skill that you have, or whatever you do with the background, but my goal is also to help students think critically in the real world. So like an assignment I give is think about three ways that a technology that you use has changed over time, and they think about it from a personal perspective. And I guess, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how can I stimulate and retain students and help them move on through their journey without humiliating them or asking them for, you know, doctor's notes or excuses. So just wanted to say how much I appreciate that aspect. Am I frozen? Sorry.
You're not. I mean, can I take a stab at that? Can I say that you can do all the things and students will still disappear on you? Like I learned Remind from Shyla. Students have my phone number. Now I'm pretty upfront, and I say, don't be calling me after 10 o'clock because I'm assuming something's going on and you're gonna get my blood pressure up, right? They're pretty respectful in using my phone number. But even with Remind, even with constant contact, even with a very fluid way of accepting assignments, sometimes you're just gonna lose students with your best efforts, right? And what you can say is you can remind them of the multiple ways that they can withdraw from the class, like just not to disappear in you is what I say, right? Like, I'm here for you, I'm here to support you, please don't disappear on me, because there are some bureaucratic things that happen that I have no control over, if that makes sense. But I did want to just unmute myself and say, Teresa, that you can do all the things, and people, even A students, have disappeared on me. And sometimes later on, I'll find out that there was a traumatic life event, you know, they couldn't afford their tuition, something happened.
Yeah, I had a couple of those students in the past too. No matter what you do, they disappear on you and they never contact you. So which is really disappointing. But thank you. So Elise has a question, then Eva.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, Monique, this has been a horrendous semester for me. I am going to have more unsuccessful students this semester than I've had in my entire teaching career. And I'm hoping that they're going to take advantage of the final due date, which is Wednesday. We'll have to see. And it is very disheartening, but we just have to hope that things will get better. But originally I raised my hand because, Shelley, I just wanted to clarify, when I use the term curate materials, I'm thinking in all my courses, the two courses that have a textbook, but mostly critical issues in health, that is OER, I'm talking about picking and choosing the reading materials and the videos and the graphics and things that I think will bring clarity to whatever topics that I'm talking about. But it's not only the required materials that they're going to be quizzed on, it's also, and Monique mentioned, she calls it a deeper dive. I use just FYI it's just for your information. And I have a whole list of things that are, you're not going to be tested on this stuff, but if you have more interest in stuff, I have the FYIs, and I could show you what it looks like, but it just looks like, it doesn't matter what it looks like because we're going to a new learning management system. Because I think even in the courses where I'm using a textbook, a lot of times textbooks are not up to date and have to be clarified. And sometimes they're not culturally sensitive, or they're talking to people that are not sitting in my classroom. So I have other materials that supplement, because everybody will get it from a different source. And it's my job to make sure they're exposed to knowledge from different perspectives. That's the best way I can explain it. That's all.
Thank you. Eva?
Hi, all. First of all, thanks to Ray and the Assessment Council to arranging this and to the speakers. Overall, it's so nice to be among passionate people who are doing so many things that match their values and their strengths to really meet our students and provide them with not only content but real personal growth. I love seeing all of these presentations. Thank you. A couple questions. First of all, Teresa, I love your goal of the class is to keep them there. I think this is aside from the focus of low and high stakes or formative and summative assessments, but that and even explicitly telling them I want to keep you here can be so helpful to that person, that student as a person. And like students, in the past, you see students who stop showing up to class, they don't do the homework, whatever, and they avoid you on campus. I'm like, I don't care about Math 05. This is really like don't be afraid to say hi to me, or I'm like, this is not the most important course in your life right now. I get it. You'll do it again. I mean, I'm not publicizing, even though institutional research has to be don't worry about it. Have you seen the passing rate? Just not you. I think seeing these people as people is really helpful. And I am thinking of myself after taking David's class this summer, which I did not complete because I have not yet taught asynchronously. I'm thinking about assessment in this context of engagement with these people is an extra challenge. And I love the idea of repeated low stakes to maintain engagement and commitment. But I must say, coming from my field, not just my department, it's really helpful to be here after coming from the Math Discipline Council meeting earlier this morning, where the underlying assumption, and this is not without reason, is that students are cheaters. And I feel like it's a really harmful baseline. But yeah, students cheat. It's like, are we going to work with AI or against it? And this is just like something aside from the online, but it came up because we're looking at online assessment in particular in math, and it is a challenge. But yeah, well, I mean, we've had AI I'm looking at Teresa's comment, we've had AI in math for a long time. You take a photo of it with an app and it gives you the answer and the steps to solve it. So it really is going to have to change our pedagogy. It's going to have to change overall undergraduate math education goals. I mean, my high school class had like a slide rule on top of it, which hadn't been used in 30 years. It was like a cute artifact. That's not how we find logs. We use a calculator. So it will change. It's just very slow. But overall, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'm sorry, it's not a particular question. Just like that, this approach to reflecting whole students and care about their learning and that you're working with them is really so helpful for me to hear. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I totally agree. I mean, from all these presentations and the previous presentations, it's very clear that we have a community of people who care about students, care about our college, their learning, graduation, retention. And I'm really glad to be part of this community. Thank you all. Thank you so much. So do you have any other questions to our presenters or anyone participating in the workshop today? Because our time is a little past 1:30, but if you have any other questions, maybe we could take one last question, then end our session. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions. So I thank you one more time to all the presenters, all the participants for coming and joining us, for your sharing your assessment procedures, asking questions, listening, learning from each other. I think this is great. And hopefully we'll continue next semester with practices from information literacy, Gen Ed proficiency. So as we decided, so we'll be contacting departments who will be implementing this as pilot studies. And we'll again have those faculty and maybe faculties to share how they've been using information literacy in their courses. So just stay tuned. You'll have emails from us. And again, thanks for sharing and happy holidays. Hopefully we'll see each other in the President's Party on the 15th. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye, take care. Have a beautiful weekend.